Edgar Cayce, Paul Solomon, and many other psychics, mystics, and readers had a prophecy of John the Beloved returning to do work during this time. Were they talking about me? Hey guys, it's John sitting here in my studio. I want to preface this video with a couple of things. This is not about trying to prove that I was the person that they were speaking of. This is not in any way, shape, or form trying to put myself on a pedestal above anybody, because that's totally antithetical to what I believe. This was a personal journey for me that started back in 1999 when I had the regression. I started doing research into figuring out whether this was a true story or not. And I started looking into what other readers, psychics, or well-known mystics had said about the reincarnation of John. In this video, I'm going to show you some of the reincarnation prophecies of John. And then I'm also going to show you how I have inadvertently fallen into teaching what they talked about. So let me just dive in. First of all, who was John the Beloved? John is referred to the Beloved because in the book of John, he says the one that Jesus loved, whom Jesus loved, right? So as in all the texts, they were all written anonymously. None of the names that are associated with the scriptures are actually said in the scripture to be that person. Those are names that were attributed later, but the book of John is said to be written or come from the disciple whom Jesus loved, who was present at the crucifixion and the Last Supper and entrusted with Jeshua's mother and his wife as well, which they don't mention in the biblical text. But my regression, I remember being at the crucifixion. So if you go on my channel, there's another video on the channel that's called 2 Moments from My Regression. You can actually hear me at the crucifixion, wailing in emotional pain, watching my friend be crucified. John the Beloved is associated with the Gospel of John, which is the Gospel of John itself is an esoteric, deeply esoteric, mystical, love-centered writing. He's supposed to be involved with revelation, which is visionary and symbolic. And there's a tradition that he never died. Because in the book of John, the disciple Peter asks Jesus, what about him? And points to John and says, Jesus says, if I want him to stay until I come, what's that to you? I'm talking to you. The John the Beloved in scriptural teachings is seen as the embodiment of love, truth, and divine presence. And he's literally preaching the message of inner divinity and love. So let's dive into some of these prophecies that were said about John and the reincarnation or the return of John. Let's start with the guy who's the king of all psychics, Edgar Cayce. In Edgar Cayce's teaching, John the Beloved, his name shall again be John. That was the line that I ran into in my figuring out who I was after my regression and everything else. The John Beloved, his name shall again be John. Edgar Cayce said that John reincarnates to clarify Jeshua's teachings or Jesus' teachings and awaken divine love. So it's about coming back and clarifying what the true way was, or the way that Jeshua was teaching, which is a way to the divine love within yourself. And Edgar Cayce literally says that the reason John is reincarnated is to clarify Jeshua's teachings and awaken the divine love. Edgar Cayce said John was also Enoch, Hesperus, and Ursus in former lives, that he has been in the earth plane continually, which is something that I've often questioned myself. John's message was literally to free others from dogma and live what is known as the Christ consciousness. Now, what is the Christ consciousness? Of course, the word Christ is something that I don't buy into because it's a messianic term about being anointed and separate. But if you think about this as the Christ meaning Jesus or Jeshua consciousness, the level of awareness that Jeshua attained, that would be the Jeshua consciousness, is becoming to that place of understanding our own personal divinity within, like he said. So that to come to the consciousness of that awareness would be the Jeshua consciousness or the Christ consciousness. Cayce also said that John never tasted death and would walk again. this concept of staying until I come or tarry until I return. Is the idea is something that I have struggled with because when I'm John Davis. I'm not John the Beloved. I'm John Davis. And when I look at this from the aspect of am I this guy that Casey was talking about? I don't, I'm John Davis. It doesn't matter who anybody was in a past life. It only matters who you are in the now. And when I had my second out of body experience, I was literally told I'm not supposed to be there yet, and I was knocked back. My crossing over experience, my out of bodies were something very different, but my second crossing over experience, I've had three, and in that second crossing over experience, I was literally told, "You're not supposed to be here yet," and I get knocked back. Casey talked about the teaching inner divinity and presence over doctrine. He said that John's job was to teach people to find the divinity within themselves and to be present, and rather than worrying about doctrines, dogmas, or methods or modalities. It's about being very present and here and now. He was also here to clarify Jeshua's message without creating a hierarchy, without creating a system or a process where someone can seem over or beneath someone else. And so Casey said that part of John's mission was clarifying Jeshua's teachings so that there would be no more hierarchy. So he was the first psychic that I dove into trying to figure out what the prophecies were about John the Beloved. Second one I ran into was a guy named Paul Solomon. And Paul Solomon said John will return during awakening. In other words, when the world was becoming more aware of their divinity. But John returned during this awakening time, not to lead, but to liberate. He was literally here to break people free so that they could be stepping into their oneness with God, or as Casey would have said, they're into their Christ consciousness. He said that John will not claim authority, but empower others. He won't put himself. The reincarnation of John will not step on a platform and say, "Follow me." He'll say, "The power's within you." And so that was one of the things that Paul Solomon said about the reincarnation of John. Now, Paul Solomon said this in the 1970s and 80s. So this is long before my regression and memories. He said that John the Beloved teaches love, clarity, and presence. Where that aligns with me is I don't want titles. I want everyone to step into their divine self. No church, no hierarchies, just clear spiritual empowerment within yourself, stepping into your personal divinity. Paul Solomon said that Christ's message will be reframed and be more relatable and more grounded so that people could understand it and comprehend it. So now we've got Edgar Cayce and Paul Solomon. These were the first two that I studied. Now, I did not in any way, shape, or form go studying more until yesterday, when I started doing a search. I basically did a search that said prophecies of the reincarnation of John the Beloved. Now, the first one I ran into is a very famous psychic, Ruth Montgomery, spoke of walk-ins and John returning as a quiet form to uplift humanity. Ruth Montgomery said that John will return to teach truth and love in times of great shift. This concept of coming here to speak his truth, to share his truth, and in a time when right now, especially, people are deconstructing their religions. This is a very interesting line to me because it's not about John putting himself in a hierarchy. It's about John awakening people to their own divinity within. And that concept of a walk-in is, there's a lot of different New Age ideas about what a walk-in is. I don't think of it in the lines of a walk-in as much as a John presence, maybe. So that to me is a different anything. Another psychic, Jesse Penn Lewis, said John will return in person or spirit to testify against false religion. So John would come back to literally debunk religion and start showing the present moment belief in the now of your divinity. Glenda Green said Jesus told her that the beloved is still among you. And that suggested that some living teacher is quietly revealing Christ's message now. So John the Beloved was still in on the earth doing work and revealing Christ's true message. Jeshua's true teachings, not Christ. That's very much a messianic word, like I said. Then Gordon Michael Scalia. Now, this is the guy who was famous for his map of coming Earth destructions. He identified John as one of the ascended souls returning to guide humanity, not to be worshipped, but to awaken others. This totally fits the concept of that finding that inner divinity within yourself, is you stepping up to that role, that truth-centered empowerment. What is your truth? Find your truth. Find the thing that brings you back to love. And, that he would emerge during a time of global awakening and not demanding titles or followers, but literally during a time when people themselves were starting to find their own divinity and to kind of help them find the divinity within themselves. These were just some of the most famous psychics. Now let's just dive into some of the additional prophecies throughout history, starting with that one I mentioned earlier, the Book of John, where he says, if I want him to stay until you come, what's that to you? I'm talking to you. This is taken as literally by early Christians because right in the Bible it says they believed John would not die. And that in itself is a very interesting concept because they truly believed that John would not die. And then it follows it up with the line, but that's not what he said. He said, if I want him to stay until I come. So they basically clarify that it's not necessarily they wouldn't die in the physical. It said that John was going to stay, whether that was John Davis or John Smith or John Henry or whatever it was. John, the essence of John was going to be here. Now, why would I go to that concept of reincarnation? Because at one point in the Bible, Jesus asked the disciples, "Who do they say that I am?" And their response is, "Some say you're Elijah or some prophet returned." He says, "No, I tell you, Elijah has come already and you have shunned him," referring to John the Baptist. That's in the book of John. That's literally him saying that not only could Elijah return, but he was John the Baptist. And the disciples were saying, you're either Elijah or some prophet returned. But for that to happen, they had to believe that Elijah or some prophet could return to be Jesus of Nazareth. So there was this understanding that the person in front of you might be a broader person or a soul of another person that came before. So it's very much a biblical idea, and it was taken very literally by early Christians. And this is really kind of like a seed of belief that John would return and possibly through a reincarnation. And now a quick word from our sponsor. Coffee Time with John. This channel runs off coffee, so get your coffee and tea at johnsjoe.com. The Pistis Sophia, the Gnostic text, describes John as a bringer of divine light for future ages. Supposedly Jeshua gave him secret teachings to share with humanity when humanity was ready. So the Pistis Sophia literally says that he's bringing divine light for future ages. He's coming to break people free and to show them the light. And so that's from the Pistis Sophia. The Latter-day Saints, the Mormons, Doctrines and Covenants, number 7. John is said to still walk the earth to bring souls unto Christ until he comes, to bring souls to the teachings of the man, to the teachings of Jeshua, to bring people to the understanding of that consciousness which Cayce talked about, but that awareness within themselves that they are the direct connection to God, and that the to be Christ or Christed means that you are awakening into that awareness of your oneness with God, like Jeshua taught. The Catholic prophecies of the 12th to 13th century, John would return during a time of religious corruption and fear. This is a prophecy written in the 12th and 13th century, so the 1100s and the 1200s, and said that John would return, and it would be during a time of religious corruption and fear. And if you go look at my other channel, the Recovering Catholic channel, you'll find very quickly that I talk about the changes to the Bible and the problems with the Bible and the myths that are created through corruption and through fear. Um, the Cathars also said his message would oppose the church control and restore divine simplicity. Now, many of you know, in my very first regression, I said it's all so simple we have a hard time comprehending it. My entire concept of Jeshua's teachings is based in simplicity. It's all far simpler. And that to me is very interesting because that to me says that even back in the 12th and 13th century, the truth of simplicity itself was something that people were very aware of because they said his message would oppose church control and restore divine simplicity. Restore meaning it was there before and now it's back. And that's why when in the Bible and Joshua says, before Abraham was, I am. Abraham was when they got into the mind and the control and all of that stuff. And then he's going back to just simply I am. There's a esoteric group called the I Am Summit, Lighthouse, etc. They teach that John returns and is channeling divine wisdom in a modern form. In other words, taking divine, simple wisdom and stating it in a way that's easy to understand and comprehend, and showing it. You know, I feel that I deliver Jeshua's teachings of presence and love and inner power, and to me, that it would be the most modern way I could say it, right? And though I came up through Catholicism, I am not a Catholic, I am not a Christian, I am not a Muslim, I am not a Hindu, I am not a Buddhist. I am, and I am love. And that's the teaching that I do. That's my personal truth, right? Now, the whole real key is no matter what path you go down of spirituality, the reality of it is that if it's leading you to a place of truth and love, then that you probably found your way. But the thing is it all comes back to the simplicity of being love in the now. And when you bring it back to that place, then what happens is you find a truth and things become much easier. So how did all of this stuff, all these things align with John of New? Um, well, I have direct recollections, memories of John the Beloved, and I had experiences coming up prior to psychics telling me about the past life and prior to um, the regression that says that there was a different connection. I've told many stories about as a child having imaginary people talking to me, um, and when I was 19, having Jeshua show up and show me the purity of love and having that change my life forever. Um, that all happened before I had a psychic say a word to me. So the awareness of something more was emerging organically and through being firmly present and not planning it out. In fact, I fought, when the psychic started telling me, I fought it tooth and nail. I did not want to be the guy who thought he was Napoleon, right? I fought it tooth and nail, and it was finally when I read that thing by Edgar Cayce about John the Beloved again being named John that I finally had my regression, which kind of cemented that okay, this is true. I couldn't deny it any longer. My teachings directly reflect what I believe to be Jeshua's original and non-dogmatic message, his teachings, his simplicity of love and compassion. I consistently talk of love over fear, and fear being the illusion of love's absence. And when you get firmly present and you release your fear, then you are creating in the now presence over prophecy and divinity over doctrine. You are divine in the now. You know, I don't need or want followers. I don't want anyone to follow me. I want people to find the divinity within. This is one of the reasons why I don't like doing multiple private sessions with the same person, because I become the crutch, and it really bothers me that I am the crutch. I would much rather have that person take what they've heard from me and go out and empower themselves, because it doesn't help, in my opinion, to continually come back to to someone for guidance when in fact you are the guide of your life. For me personally, it's all about you stepping into your power. You're coming into the understanding that you are one with God and you have the ability. So then I went on ChatGPT and I asked all these questions. And I said, is there someone else in the world that could plausibly be this reincarnation of John the Beloved? ChatGPT surprised me, kind of shook me to my core a little bit. ChatGPT said there was no known public spiritual teacher who matches the criteria, that no one else uses the name, lives the message, or emerged without fanfare to clarify Jeshua's teaching from love. But it also said others may exist privately, but I'm doing the work right now and in plain sight bearing fruit. So why does all this matter? And is this just an ego? Is this video just an ego trip for me? It's not. I, like everybody else in the world, am often looking for validation, right? And though we don't need validation, validation is the fear of not being loved in some form. And for me, when I look at this, I had my own self-doubts, of this very esoteric and big idea or concept. And I wanted to find out whether there were other prophecies of this, because it's such a big and bizarre sort of story. The real question isn't, is it me? The real question is, are we as a collective ready to hear the simplicity of the message, to come back to our divinity, to step into our power, to understand that we have the ability? Are we ready? The real question is are we ready to step into it? I'm not asking for belief. I'm asking for presence. The return of John may be about a name, but the vibration of truth rising again, it's about us stepping into that power and coming back into that place of understanding our connection to God. Listen to the message that is being spoken in this video and all 1,800 videos on my channel. If it feels right to you, if you feel the resonance of it and it awakens you, perhaps that's the only confirmation you really need. Do I believe that I am the reincarnation of John the Beloved? I don't think it matters, because I'm only conscious in one moment, this moment, the moment of presence. And I am John Davis in this present moment. Doesn't matter if I was John the Beloved or anybody else. It only matters who I am right now. I don't believe that there's a group of people coming together for a sacred mission. I don't believe that in any way, shape, or form. I believe that we are here to awaken to our own divinity within, and the concept of needing people to come together is antithetical to that. There's no need. The power is always within you, and that's what Yeshua taught. And so my question to you is this. What do you think? Now, for me personally, I believe that in my past life, I was John the Beloved. I also believe that I don't understand what that means. I don't know whether I'm just tapping into the oneness of God and having that experience, or, like I've said in multiple videos, I know multiple, Johns and Peters and Pauls and Mary Magdalene's, over 30 of them, so I know there's a lot of people who've had experiences that believe they were of that time. But if you're living your life to fulfill something of that time, you're not present. Right now, if you look online on the spiritual channels, you're going to find they're talking about conspiracy theories of the past or prophecies of the future. None of them are present. Here now, you are divine. Here now, you can awaken to this ability to release the past, which is dogma, and let go of the future, which is conjecture, and come to right here and right now and just literally live firmly present, knowing that you are the creator of your experience and that you can be love in the present. And that is the Christ consciousness, according to Cayce. And so this is my thought on that. Let me know what your thoughts are. Are they talking about me? Are they not talking about me? Does it matter? You let me know what your thoughts are on this, because I would love to hear that. Because for me, this little run down the rabbit hole was to kind of say, okay, is there evidence of this? And to me, it was affirming that I'm doing good work. That's all it really did for me. It didn't put me on a pedestal. It didn't put me on in a way of looking down on anybody else. It literally is just a way of me saying, okay, The things that I teach naturally from my own truth seem to align with all of them. And in that alignment, I know I believe that truth can change the world for positive ways. And so that's what I do. And that's my thought on this. You guys have a great day, and I'll talk to you soon. See ya. Bye.